The man you're seeing in this video is Madison Cawthorn. He was one of the rising stars of the Republican National Convention this summer, getting one of the primetime slots, during which he ended his speech by standing up out of his wheelchair while reciting a partial version of the Pledge of Allegiance. I can understand why people would see that and think it's inspiring and patriotic and makes you proud to be an American. That is, unless you learn more about him. Now, you may be thinking, that guy looks very young. He is. The Constitution says you have to be 25 years old to be in Congress, and Madison Cawthorn just turned 25. He's on track to become the youngest member of Congress, and he's running in North Carolina's 11th district because the former representative, Mark Meadows, is now the White House Chief of Staff. That also tells you something about how red this district is. Cawthorn is eager to take Meadows' spot. He's proudly conservative. He's Christian. He's opinionated in the same way Tucker Carlson is, which is to say his ideas suck and they're not based in fact, but he believes them very strongly and with a ton of confidence. He's the kind of person who uses the word woke as a slur against liberals. Like, how dare you members of Woketopia fight for social justice? Not in my beautiful America of 1776. He also says the most racist people in the country are white liberals because they're always talking about race. For some reason. And he hates it when people talk about civil rights. There are also symbols of white nationalism that appear in his interviews, like the original American flag with 13 stars representing the colonies. You remember that time in our nation's history? It's when slavery was legal. Of course, he's a strong supporter of all things Donald Trump, and as you could tell from the convention video, he's also visibly disabled because of an accident that occurred when he was 18, which certainly garners a lot of sympathy. But over the past few weeks, we've learned a lot about Cawthorn that is very disturbing. So disturbing that even the most fundamentalist young Christians in the country are warning fellow Republicans not to vote for him. And considering he has no paper trail as a politician because of his age and lack of experience, those young Christians are offering voters the best insight we have into who he really is. Now, if you've heard anything about Cawthorn in the past month or two, it may have been because of a couple of scandals that got attention after he won his primary and became this GOP darling. The first one is from a few years ago, because people began looking through his social media posts and saw that in 2017, he visited Hitler's former vacation home called the Eagle's Nest. He posted to Instagram that it was a place that had been on his bucket list for a while. Now, I should say he referred to Hitler as a supreme evil, which, yes, but he also referred to him as the Führer, which is not exactly uncomplimentary. Even if you want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say this was a historical trip, and he posted about it using careless wording, that post was weird at best. More recently, he came under fire after his campaign created a website to trash a journalist who had written critical things about him. The website said that the journalist left the world of academia, quote, to work for non-white males like Cory Booker, who aims to ruin white males running for office, unquote. That's not a dog whistle. That's a megaphone. Why would it be a problem to work for non-white males? And how the hell is Cory Booker your idea of a scary guy? I guess what Cawthorn was referring to was the fact that the reporter said somewhere he was excited to work with Booker's presidential campaign, in part because Booker was a non-traditional candidate, meaning he's not white, which is not a racist thing to say. I mean, I'm excited for more diverse representation too. That sentence was later changed to say the journalist had, quote, become a political operative and is an unapologetic defender of left-wing identity politics, unquote. Which still makes no sense, isn't true, and doesn't address the problems anyone had with the original wording. Cawthorn's campaign also issued a statement saying, quote, the syntax of our language was unclear and unfairly implied I was criticizing Cory Booker, unquote. Buddy, this wasn't a grammar problem. You're just racist. Cory Booker, who has endorsed Joe Biden, is not trying to ruin things for white people. The person doing that is Trump. But all of that paled in comparison to what happened in August, when a conservative Christian news outlet called World published an article in which two women accused Cawthorn of aggressive sexual behavior. One woman, named Katrina, said that when she was 17 and Cawthorn was 19, they went on a date. They knew each other because they were part of this insular homeschooling Christian community, which implies they're also sexually abstinent. But on their date, she said he forcibly tried to kiss her, even though she had already rejected such a move earlier that night. His campaign didn't deny that happened, but basically said it was an awkward moment that he remembered differently. He said it wasn't intentional, and he apologized if he made her uncomfortable. Then, because he's a gentleman, the campaign accused Katrina of being used by Democrats to further their political agenda. World also posted about another person. A few months after that incident with Katrina, Cawthorn offered a ride to another girl named Francesca to a graduation ceremony. She was also part of that homeschooled Christian community. She also had a boyfriend, but she said Cawthorn took the scenic route to an after-party, began asking her sexual questions that she didn't want to answer, talked about his genitalia, and tried to make out with her. She told World that it was hard to physically resist. I felt like pressured to give into it because he started being aggressive, and he's a strong guy. He had buff arms and worked out his upper body a lot. If you're not into somebody and he's making a move on you and he's bigger than you and you're in a car, that's frightening. She only came forward because she saw what Katrina had posted on Instagram and realized she wasn't the only one. Now, all of that stuff is disturbing. It's bad behavior. It's not criminal, but the women are trying to tell the world that this guy is being held up as some sort of conservative Christian role model, and he's not. Won't anyone listen to them? It's been a couple of months since that story was published. As I'm making this video, the nonpartisan Cook Political Report says Cawthorn's district, North Carolina's 11th, is a Republican-leaning district, meaning if the election happened right now, the Republican, Cawthorn, would probably win the race. But we've actually learned more about this guy since those initial stories, and now more conservative Christians are trying to warn the district not to elect him. Consider this. After he graduated high school, Cawthorn attended a place called Patrick Henry College. If you're not familiar with Patrick Henry College, it's the sort of place that makes Jerry Falwell Jr.'s Liberty University seem like a party school. It is super conservative, super Christian, and it is well known for sending a disproportionate number of graduates into politics. It's like a breeding ground for Republican staffers. And like many Christian schools and churches, it's also really awful at dealing with allegations of sexual abuse. In 2014, an article about the school's problem with this went viral and made the argument that some female students were afraid to tell administrators they were sexually abused by male students because it would mean admitting that they were either drinking alcohol or fooling around with someone until things got out of hand. And since they were not married, that's a problem. They were no longer pure. That is not allowed in conservative Christian circles. In other words, by coming forward about assault, they worry they might get expelled for breaking the rules. This problem got so bad that the president of the school resigned over the issue. I say all that to set you up for what happened next. Madison Cawthorn didn't go to Patrick Henry College until 2016, but he was still apparently part of the problem with their culture. He only attended for one semester before dropping out after earning near failing grades, but it was still long enough to earn a bad reputation. I know that because more than 175 former students at Patrick Henry College have now written an open letter urging people not to vote for him. 175 former students is a ton of people when you realize this school only has an enrollment of about 300 students a year. The letter lays out even more reasons Cawthorn is just a disaster waiting to happen. Let me repeat that. Graduates of one of the most conservative Christian colleges in the country are telling other Republicans not to support the conservative Christian candidate in a close race because he's that horrible of a person. The letter is long, so I won't read the whole thing, but let me tell you the big points those graduates raised. First, Cawthorn was a sexual predator there too, even in the wheelchair. The letter says he would invite women on joyrides in his car, taking women to secluded areas where he would then, quote, lock the doors and proceed to make unwanted sexual advances, unquote. There was basically a whisper network among women at the school warning each other not to be alone with him. And all of that is on top of the women who spoke to World in August. Second, he's a liar. The letter says that Cawthorn once spoke at a campus-wide chapel service and said he was a top football recruit for the Naval Academy until the tragic accident that put him in a wheelchair. It was a detail that made him look even better to the audience. You know, a guy who had everything going for him until something awful happened, but now God is using him for something greater. But guess what? There was a lawsuit involving his accident in which Cawthorn had to give a sworn deposition. And in that deposition, Cawthorn admitted he was already rejected from the Naval Academy before his accident. They never wanted him, much less thought of him as a top football recruit until he wasn't. Here's another lie about that accident. Cawthorn said his best friend got out of the car and left him for dead. Cawthorn heroically escaped. But according to multiple reports about that accident, that friend and another bystander pulled Cawthorn out of the car and saved his life. Even Cawthorn's father said this about that friend during an interview.
He wasn't scared, didn't run from the fire. He pulled Madison out of the car because he was unconscious.
He was scared. He didn't run from the fire. He pulled Madison from the car because he was unconscious. So Cawthorn was building himself up by throwing his friend, the guy who helped save his life, under the bus. The friend was the hero. Third, there's vandalism. Apparently, Cawthorn stole a fancy sword with sentimental value from a dorm, and it was later found destroyed in a nearby pond. Is that a huge deal? Maybe, maybe not. But the point is, this guy doesn't care about the places that welcome him. Why would he be a good congressional representative? Finally, the letter says this, which really stuck with me. We remember what Madison Cawthorn did to our community. We remember how he took advantage of our community's trust. We remember how deeply he hurt our community. We remember that he was a wolf in sheep's clothing who made our small, close-knit community his personal playground of debauchery. We remember that other survivors have yet to share their stories. And it is because we remember that we will not sit idly by while he is celebrated as the new face of the conservative movement, millennials, and Christians. That is some Christian shade. While Trump supporters are treating Cawthorn as a conservative hero, conservative Christians who know him are saying that's not true. And what did Cawthorn have to say about this open letter? He responded on Facebook with his own letter, not addressing anything the Patrick Henry alums said, but saying he had plenty of support from graduates of that school, like 6 of them who signed the letter, 2 of whom happened to work for him. Maybe the most interesting thing about Cawthorn's statement was how he had to revise it. This is a paragraph that was in the original statement, and which I found by looking at the edit history on Facebook. The alumni of Patrick Henry College were delighted to hear that PHC's founder and Chancellor Emeritus, Dr. Michael Farris, reached out in his personal capacity to congratulate Madison Cawthorn on his primary victory and offer any support he needed in his race for Congress. We are proud to see that the founder of our college shares the values that the students of our institution hold, and supports a candidate that reflects well on Patrick Henry College. Reading that, it sounds like the founder of the school, Michael Farris, is endorsing Cawthorn. But according to the same reporter who Cawthorn's campaign said works for non-white males, that's not true. Here's what actually happened. Farris did give Cawthorn a call to say congrats after his primary win, and that's it. Farris has since said he doesn't really know Cawthorn and definitely isn't issuing any sort of endorsement, even in a personal context, and that Cawthorn's statement about him offering support is not true. That's why the paragraph had to be removed. Imagine going to a conservative Christian college that teaches students that evolution is a hoax and trans people don't exist, and having the president publicly say, listen, I need you to stop lying to people. Look, when it comes down to it, everyone who knows anything about this guy and doesn't share his genes is warning voters to say no to him. Republicans nationwide may salivate at his candidacy. Look, a handsome young Trump supporter, the GOP's answer to AOC. But locally, the alarm bells are ringing off the hook. So, is he gonna win? Well, it's really his race to lose. In case you're wondering, the Democrat in this race is an older retired guy named Colonel Mo Davis. And this statement on his website perfectly summarizes the difference between him and Cawthorn. A 25-year military veteran who has served his country with honor, or a 25-year-old who is more concerned with signaling to extremists than doing the job. Damn. Davis was actually a chief prosecutor at Guantanamo Bay before he resigned because he refused to follow the demands of the George W. Bush administration and use evidence obtained through torture. His biggest scandal so far appears to be some questionable tweets in which he used vulgar language, which honestly doesn't seem nearly as significant to me. What he said isn't as disturbing as what Cawthorn did. I don't say this often, but voters in that district need to listen to the graduates of Patrick Henry College and stop Cawthorn before he becomes an elected lawmaker.